January 13, 27 BC. The Curia Julia, the political epicenter of the Roman world. The heavy bronze doors are barred. Inside the cavernous, marble-lined hall, hundreds of the most powerful men in the ancient world sit in a state of terrified, suffocating silence. Standing before them is a 36-year-old warlord named Gaius Octavius. His hands are stained with the blood of a brutal, decades-long civil war. His veteran legions encircle the city. His vast personal wealth surpasses the treasury of the entire state. By all conventional political logic, this is the moment he should draw his sword. This is the moment he should declare himself absolute dictator, crush the Senate, and subjugate the Republic through brute, undeniable force. But Octavius does not draw his sword. Instead, he speaks. He announces that the crisis has passed. He announces that he is stepping down. He formally and absolutely surrenders his control of the armies, the provinces, and the treasury back to the Senate and the people of Rome. He begs to retire as a simple, private citizen. The senators stare in stunned disbelief. Then, they begin to weep. They tear their garments. They fall to their knees and beg him to stay. They willingly chain themselves to his will, legally granting him the vast powers he just renounced. They bestow upon him a new, sacred title, Augustus, the revered one. The trap is sprung. The Republic is dead. It is a political maneuver of breathtaking psychological brilliance. Augustus has not conquered Rome with spears or siege engines. He has conquered it using the architecture of the human mind. The men in this room believe they have saved the Republic. They are entirely unaware that they have just handed the keys of the world to its first emperor. To understand how the Roman Empire dominated the globe for half a millennium, we must look beyond the testudo formations and the gleaming armor of the legions. We must examine the invisible chains. We must understand the dark, intricate, and deeply unsettling psychology of how a single human being conditions millions of free men to crave their own subjugation. First, the architect of the empire must neutralize the trauma of the past. Augustus knows intimately what happens to men who claim absolute power in Rome. His adoptive father, Julius Caesar, declared himself dictator for life. In response, the Roman elite stabbed him 23 times on the Senate floor. The Roman psyche is deeply, violently allergic to the concept of a king. The hatred of monarchy is the foundational myth of their civilization. To survive, Augustus must rule with absolute authority, but he must never look like a ruler. He must weaponize humility. While later emperors like Nero will build sprawling golden palaces, Augustus chooses to rule the known world from a remarkably modest and adorned house on the Palatine Hill. He wears simple homespun wool woven by his wife. He walks the streets. For 40 years, the master of the Mediterranean sleeps in the same plain, cramped bedroom. This is not a lifestyle choice. It is a psychological shield. By living like a common, traditional citizen, he deliberately short-circuits the deeply ingrained patrician alarm bells. When the senators look at him, they do not see an Eastern despot dripping in gold. They see a modest public servant. He effectively hides an absolute military dictatorship behind the comforting, boring facade of middle-class respectability. But hiding the sword is not enough. He must change how the sword is wielded. This leads to the brilliant, theatrical deception of the recusatio, the refusal of power. By threatening to walk away on that January day in 27 BC, Augustus leverages a profound psychological terror. The Senate knows that if he leaves, the veteran legions will riot, and the horrific, bloody civil wars will instantly resume. He forces the Senate into a form of political Stockholm syndrome. He makes the hostage beg the captor to put the chains back on. When he finally, reluctantly agrees to stay, he institutes a masterclass in psychological framing. He refuses the title of dictator. Instead, he claims he is ruling not through imperium, the legal, violent power of command, but through auctoritas. Auctoritas translates roughly to clout, prestige, or moral authority. It is the soft, psychological weight of a respected father. When Augustus tells a senator what to do, it is legally framed as a mere suggestion from a revered elder. But because that elder possesses 30 loyal legions, the suggestion carries the weight of a death sentence. By masking hard power with soft influence, he allows the proud Roman elite to maintain their dignity. They do not feel they are obeying a tyrant. They feel they are yielding to superior wisdom. Yet, to truly dominate a society, one must control its narrative of the future. Long before he secures absolute power, while he is still fighting his great rival Mark Antony, Augustus begins a massive construction project in the Campus Martis. He builds the Mausoleum of Augustus. It is a colossal, towering drum of stone and earth, topped with a bronze statue of himself. He builds his tomb while he is still in his 30s. It is a massive, inescapable psychological anchor. Mark Antony is living in Egypt, rumored to be moving the capital of the empire to Alexandria. But by building a mountainous tomb in the heart of Rome, Augustus sends a silent, terrifying message to the Roman elite. I belong to Rome. I am never leaving. I am here forever. It breaks the political will of his rivals before the final battle is even fought. Back in the marble halls of Rome, the consolidation of power shifts from the physical to the spiritual. In the ancient world, religion and politics are inextricably linked. The gods do not just grant victory in battle, they legitimize the state. Augustus understands that whoever speaks for the gods controls the masses. He does not simply wait to become the Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest. He systematically infiltrates every major priestly college in Rome. He becomes an augur, reading the flights of birds. He becomes one of the quindecimviri, guarding the sacred Sibylline books. He becomes an epulo, organizing the sacred feasts. He establishes a spatial monopoly on the divine. By placing himself at the center of every sacred institution, he psychologically castrates his political rivals. If a rival senator claims that annul ange the gods, they must contradict Augustus, the man who literally holds every priestly office. He steals the monopoly on truth. Disagreeing with him is no longer just bad politics. It is blasphemy. It is here we must pause and ask the deep, unsettling question that sits at the core of the Roman transition from republic to empire. Why did the Romans accept this? Why did a civilization of proud, fierce aristocrats and men whose own grandfathers had assassinated Julius Caesar in the name of liberty willingly surrender their freedom to a single man? The answer lies in the deep, psychological exhaustion of the human soul. For 80 years prior to the ascension of Augustus, Rome had been tearing itself apart. The social war, the dictatorship of Sulla, the uprising of Spartacus, the clash of Caesar and Pompey, the apocalyptic war between Augustus and Antony. Generations of Romans had known nothing but proscriptions, massacres, and chaos. Their property was seized, their sons were drafted and killed. Augustus understood a terrifying, universal truth about human nature. When faced with prolonged, agonizing chaos, humanity will always choose the man who offers order. Liberty is a luxury of a safe society. When the streets are running with blood, the human mind craves paternal certainty. The Romans did not succumb to Augustus because they were weak. They succumbed because they were exhausted. He offered them the ultimate psychological trade. He would take their political freedom, and in exchange, he would let them sleep peacefully through the night. With the populace exhausted and compliant, Augustus systematically dismantles the remaining agency of the Senate through the subtle manipulation of protocol. He takes the title of Princeps Senatus, the first man of the Senate. This is an ancient republican honor, but Augustus weaponizes it. The title grants him the right to speak first on any issue debated on the floor. It seems like a minor procedural privilege. In reality, it is the devastating psychological principle of anchoring. By speaking first, Augustus frames the exact boundary of acceptable thought. If a crisis arises, he stands and delivers his opinion. The anchor is set. Any senator who wishes to propose an alternative is no longer simply debating a policy. They are actively contradicting the revered savior of the state in public. The psychological pressure of the room immediately isolates the dissenter. Through simple meeting protocol, he turns free debate into an exercise in sycophancy. But controlling their minds requires controlling their bodies. Augustus institutes a sweeping, seemingly mundane reform regarding public attire. He issues a strict edict banning modern, comfortable tunics and foreign cloaks in the forum. Every citizen conducting business in the heart of Rome is legally forced to wear the traditional, heavy, woolen toga. It is not a fashion choice. It is sartorial subjugation. The traditional toga is an incredibly unwieldy garment. You cannot run in a toga. It requires the wearer to constantly keep their left arm bent to hold the heavy fabric in place, physically restricting their movement and stripping them of martial capability. You cannot easily draw a concealed weapon. But more profoundly, it enforces a psychological regression. By forcing the elite to dress like their ancient, subservient ancestors, Augustus subconsciously drags their minds back to a simpler era. An era where unquestioning obedience to traditional, patriarchal authority was absolute. He physically wraps them in the fabric of submission. Yet, despite his total control, the threat of aristocratic rivals remains. In the past, dictators like Sulla neutralized rivals through proscriptions, writing their names on lists and having them murdered in the streets. But execution breeds martyrs, and martyrs breed blood feuds. Augustus pioneers a far more insidious method of eradication: adoption. When a powerful patrician family poses a threat, Augustus does not send assassins. He sends a marriage proposal. He forces rival families to marry his daughters, his nieces, his stepchildren. If a rival has a particularly talented son, Augustus legally adopts him into his own Julian household. He weaponizes the Roman legal concept of patria potestas, the absolute power of the father. By legally adopting a rival's heir, he dissolves their autonomous patrician bloodline into his own vortex of power. He does not kill the enemy. He turns the enemy's son into his own dependent grandson. He eradicates political opposition by suffocating it in a deadly, inescapable familial embrace. This total control extends finally to the masses, utilizing a psychological assault that reaches into every pocket and marketplace in the empire: the coinage. Before Augustus, the currency of the Republic was chaotic. minted by various magistrates who stamped them with a bewildering array of gods and ancient ancestors. Augustus standardizes the currency and stamps it with his own profile. But there is a crucial, deeply manipulative detail to this portrait. His face never ages. Augustus lives to be 76 years old. For decades, whenever a Roman buys bread, pays a debt, or receives a wage, they stare into the eternally youthful, mathematically idealized face of a 30-year-old demigod. But whether a coin is minted in 20 BC or 10 AD, the portrait on the denarius remains exactly the same. It is a masterpiece of micro-indoctrination. He denies the public the visual evidence of his own mortality. He ceases to be a frail, aging man and becomes an immortal concept. He indoctrinates the masses into believing his rule is not a temporary political phase, but a permanent, eternal state of nature. And when mortality finally comes for him, he executes his ultimate act of reality manipulation. Upon his death in 14 AD, the empire is introduced to the res gesta divi Augusti, the deeds of the divine Augustus. It is a meticulously crafted autobiography, ordered to be carved into bronze pillars in Rome and replicated on temple walls across the known world. It is the final, permanent psychological cage. In it, he does not mention the purges. He does not mention the destruction of the Republic. He frames his violent, bloody military coup as an act of selfless salvation. He controls the narrative so completely that he forces history itself to submit to his will. The reign of Augustus was not merely a triumph of military logistics or economic management. It was the supreme triumph of psychological warfare. He understood that true, lasting power is never taken by force. True power is when the subjugated are conditioned to willingly put on the chains, entirely convinced that they are wearing armor. From the modest bedroom on the Palatine Hill to the ageless face stamped on a silver coin, Augustus constructed a labyrinth for the human mind. He knew that if you control a man's environment, his traditions, his religion, and his perception of reality, you do not need to threaten his life. It is a chilling, beautiful blueprint of authority. It reveals a dark truth that transcends antiquity, a truth that still echoes in the corridors of power today. The greatest conquerors in history do not wage war on the battlefield. And when the illusion is perfect, the subjects will fall to their knees, weeping with gratitude, and hand over the world.